It's time for the Onyx News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the Onyx News Podcast, Margie K.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Onyx News. I'm your host, Margie K., and we are here every Friday evening at 6 p.m. Central. Glad you could join me this evening because we have a great show for you. First, I want to mention a couple of items that we have got in the merch section of the website, onyxnetwork.com. We've got these new anti-Mothman t-shirts to repel Mothman. For those of you who've had problems with him, as I have, this will help do that. And then also, we've got our new 2025 calendar available. And of course, weird paranormal holidays are listed. And these are national days that are official, and you won't believe some of them. They're pretty strange. That's also available with a link on the website. My guest this evening is my partner in crime, Violet Wisdom. Violet has she's a historic researcher and freelance writer. Her work can be found both in the Onyx Network magazine and on the Onyx Network website. Wisdom additionally has extensively researched 19th century religious communities in the United States and psychology and philosophy. Her property near the Missouri River has yielded dozens of Native American arrowheads and spear points, of which she continues to research, as well as the people who once called her land home. She served on historic commissions and teaches classes on historic preservation. Several of her home research projects have led to owners identifying the source of unexplained activity in their home. And welcome to the program, Violet.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so glad you could join me tonight so we could talk about our brand new book, and I'll just show it right here, How to Research a Haunted House for Homeowners, Renters, Investors, and Paranormal Investigators. And this is very unique, isn't it?
It really is. I don't think anyone has done anything like this, where you have experts in both fields coming together to write one how-to book.
Yeah, and you, let's talk about your background a little bit. How did you get interested in doing historic research?
I was born curious. I remember being a little girl and going through my grandmother's end table. She had these end tables that had cubbies in them. And inside those cubbies, there were little books about the history of our town and our area. And I was just obsessed with them. I always wanted to know what the history was of a town. And then when we moved here about 25 years ago, there was so much history. I really started to dig into more local history, got involved with some other local historians and, like I said, commissions. And pretty soon I was researching people's actual homes and businesses. So it's about 50 projects later. Here I am.
50 projects is a lot. How long did it take you to do all those?
That was over about a 14-year period. And some of those projects, because we had something very specific we were looking for, and we can talk about this, this is kind of why I want people to have a guide. Sometimes what it is that you want to find doesn't exist. And sometimes something else even more extraordinary does exist about your property. But we've had a few projects where the homeowner wanted something very specific, and I've had at least 3 of them took a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I know some of them are larger homes that are now bed and breakfasts or open to the public so that people can share this information with their guests. And a lot of guests always, they find the history fascinating.
I do. If I go to a business, even if it's a restaurant and they have some of their history on the back of their menu, now I feel more connected to that place than if I didn't know that history.
I do the same thing. I read about the history of the restaurant owners. It's fascinating to get that information. Now, your property has yielded a lot of really cool finds. What is the most interesting thing you found?
I think outside of we did start a dig in the back of the property, and we did find coal because we suspected that it was a camp, a Native American camp. And we did find coal at the correct depth to show that that was true. So that's probably, archaeologically speaking, the most fascinating find. But for me, it was the Atlatl spear point that I found. Funny story. I had some roosters. We had just gotten chickens. I had 2 roosters. You shouldn't do that. They'll fight. And I was going to break the fight up. So I got in there to break up this fight, and lo and behold, right there in front of me in the mud, the rain had brought it up, was this huge, it was probably about this long, Atlatl spear point. And to our local archaeologist, and he said it's probably 9,000 to 10,000 years old. It's a beautiful piece. So
wow.
Yeah.
So there's evidence that there was a lot going on your property that you own now.
So you have modern history, and then you have pre-modern history of, that's where that Atlatl spear point came from. That's up at the hill on our property, but you go deeper down towards our creek, and there's evidence of all other different tribes, more modern tribes that lived on our property. So it's kind of fascinating to know that the history goes really deep. I mean, it does for most places, but not everyone finds proof of that.
Have you ever had anything spooky happen on your property anywhere?
Well, we joke that we have Bob, our resident visitor, who's decided that we're part of the family now. We think it was Bob who knocked my dad's camera over when he was out here this summer filming, because no one was near it, and it's a heavy tripod, a heavy camera. There's just no explanation as to how it crashed on the floor and broke. And we just kind of feel that Bob was a little overwhelmed with having so many people in the home.
And he kind of hangs out around the stairs, right?
Upstairs near our daughter's bedroom. Yeah, our dog is always coming up, and our cat, he's gone now, but our cat used to come up to that same spot and just be staring at something. And the dog does too. And we don't see anybody, but they do.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What about elsewhere on your property? Have you gotten any sense of a presence there, of spirits that might have been from ancient times?
Just the woods are magical. The woods are just, they're healing, and you don't feel alone, but you don't, how do I explain that? It's a good feeling. I feel like have something really wonderful around, some ones around me that it just feels very safe, and very, very magical.
Yeah. Well, of course we talk about stuff all the time because we work together. And then we at some point decided to write this book. Why don't you explain how we came about deciding to do this together?
Well, one of the things I noticed as someone who has spent 14 years promoting historic preservation, that it seems to, when you put on, say, a local event, come learn some history, you get a couple people, they're the same people, they're really into history, and it seems like not everybody is. And then I started to notice when I started to work for the network with helping with the social media and the blogs, that people are interested in the history of their homes especially when it comes to feeling that their home is haunted. And I'm not the expert on the paranormal side, but I can explain in detail how you can find out everyone that lived in your home, what they did for a living, what their family was like, how many kids they had, where they came from, even down to, architecturally, this is what your house looked like, and it could have changed. That I can provide, but only you can provide the paranormal side of it. And I thought, wait a minute, this is the perfect blend. Like this book needs to be written so that people have access to a concise guide to find out everything they need for their home. And yeah, I pitched it, and you took my pitch.
Yeah. Yeah. And then after we had decided to do this, I got to thinking one day, we need a house to research to show how this works. And then I thought, I know the perfect house, and it's in Springfield, Missouri.
Yeah.
It's a house I used to live in. So I'll just explain a little bit about that. Those who attended the conference already know this story, but for those who didn't, this is it. When I was 14 and 15 years old, so 2 years, we lived in Springfield in this house, and it is near Drury College. It's right across the street from Drury College. It's in an older part of town, and it is a large home. I think it's 3,700 square feet. It has a lot of rooms, and the minute we walked in that front door, the rest of the family was in front, and my mother and I walked in last, and this cold energy went right through me and my mother, and we both got the chills. And I said, Mom, this house is haunted. She goes, I know. And like, okay, so we didn't think anything else of it. Okay, so it's haunted. We were busy moving. So we spent all day moving everything in, taking boxes upstairs, picking out our bedrooms and stuff. And I got the largest bedroom other than my parents', which was on the right side here, going up the steps over here to the right and the upper level, right over that porch, our area on the right. And if you'll notice, I just recently took this photo when I was down for the Bigfoot conference in Springfield. I stopped by to get a couple of photos, and this time I didn't walk up to the door and knock because they have shades on all the windows now, and they didn't used to have that before, but it looks vacant. It still looks vacant. And every time I've gone by there in the last several years, in like 15 years, it has been vacant. I don't think anybody can stay in the house. It's so haunted. And this should be on the National Register of Most Haunted in the United States because, so much stuff happened there. But just take a look at this picture and look how fuzzy and out of focus it is on the right side only. And the rest is very clear. I find that to be strange. And then here's the back. And my sister's bedroom was over here in the upper left corner. And again, we see some out of focus, some blurriness there. So I thought that was kind of strange. But long story short about the property, the very day we moved in, we did not have our beds put together yet. We put our mattresses on the floors, and we were going to do the beds the next day. And we had just all gone to bed when we heard this blood-curdling scream from down the hall where my sister's room was. And my dad, my brother, and I ran down the hall, looked in the door without turning the light on, and we saw what we thought was my sister lying in her bed with the covers on. And we said, what's wrong? And we're looking down at the bed. Her voice came from the closet. And she said, that's not me. And then the covers just kind of slowly went down to nothing. And so that was our first introduction to how haunted this house was. Usually, in the movies, things slowly escalate. Not here. No, this was a nightmare from day one. And my sister refused to sleep in the bedroom. She moved into the closet, which was a very big closet, walk-in closet. She stayed there the whole time, the whole 2 years we were there. But her dressing table was outside in her room. And she said one day she was fixing her hair at the dressing table and she saw a reflection in the mirror of an old lady standing there looking at her. She was wearing all black. And she just thought it was a person there. And she turns around, there was nothing. So things, we heard noises. There was water coming off and on by itself. Sometimes, threatening to overflow sinks and bathtubs. And that seemed to be a big deal that they were interested in. Stomping feet, doors opening and slamming, and kitchen cabinet doors opening by themselves. I mean, it was just a constant thing almost every single day. There were faces in the walls. It was crazy. And we couldn't wait to get out of there. It escalated to the point that we were always stressed and we had a lack of sleep. And my parents were arguing all the time. I was arguing with my parents all the time. And my parents got a divorce. And I think that had a lot to do with it. I think that house had a lot because of the negative energy that was there. Now, but the most spectacular thing that ever happened to me, I was in my bedroom one evening getting ready to go to bed. I had turned the light out. I was getting ready to go to sleep. And all of a sudden, this bright blue-white light came in the window with the closed shade and blinded me and was throughout the entire room. And now, of course, being a UFO investigator, I know that was probably UFO related. But what was associated with that was not, as far as I know. I looked over at my dressing table mirror, and in the mirror, I could see a woman dressed in black, an older lady with a big black hat on, like early 1910s, somewhere in there, 1900 maybe. And she had a butcher knife in her hand, and she was stabbing a younger woman dressed all in white in front of her, and just stabbing her. And I'm like, oh my God. And this was just like watching a movie. It was so clear and in color. And I was just shocked. And I was scared. And then all of a sudden that went away, and a music stand appeared in the middle of the room, an old fashioned one. And it lifted up off the ground and came right towards me. And I closed my eyes because I thought it was going to hit me. And then I opened my eyes and it was gone, and the blue-white light was gone. So I don't know what that relationship was, but I knew somebody had been murdered in the house. So I did a little bit of research. We were told that the house was possibly there during the Civil War. We were told it was owned by a physician who had made it into a makeshift hospital. And of course, there was room for it with all those rooms. And there was an elevator in the house. So that's why we call it the elevator house in the book. So, of course, I told you about this. And you said, yeah, this sounds like a good house to research.
So here was the great thing, though. You didn't give me that many details. And so right. I knew about your sister's room. I knew a few things, but I didn't know a lot of details. And it turns out that's a good thing. When you have, your historic researcher finding out who lived there and who they were, and then you have your paranormal researcher doing their work, figuring things out on their end, and then you can come together and say, okay, here's what I have. Okay, they match. And when I did the research on the elevator house, as we call it, it was going like, most research projects do, hit some roadblocks, which I go in my section of the book, I teach you how to do all the research on your property. And then I kind of bring you with me to research the elevator house. So as I'm discovering, I'm sharing with you how I discovered what I found. And we hit a roadblock where the street number was wrong. Is something wasn't picking up. So, these are the normal things you run into when you're doing a real professional research on a property. And then once we got that worked out, there's the correct information I need. and I find this woman that lived in the house, and I wish everyone had stories for every house I ever researched, because to have that oh my gosh moment with all of them would have been really cool. But not everybody shared the kind of things that you did, or even that there was something, like a haunting going on. Only a few of them did. So when you find an explanation, it's exciting. It's a little freaky, but it's exciting. And yeah, I found a woman that had lived there, and it all made sense. Then it all made sense. What your sister went through, why she was there. It clicked. So it's a good reason to research the house.
I'm hoping that someday we can find an actual newspaper article or something about the death of that young woman.
Yeah, there was nothing. Yeah,
and you couldn't find anything, but there's no doubt in my mind that happened because I saw it.
Because you saw it.
Yeah, but
yeah, there's nothing in the in that local paper. Something we also discovered in researching this property is that, especially smaller communities, and not that Springfield's small, it's not small, but at the time that we're researching, it's not a huge metropolis, it's not massive.
Right, it's a mid-sized city.
Yeah, it's a good-sized city. But when something not so wonderful happens to a prominent figure in town, you're not going to necessarily get all the details from that town's newspaper. And that was the case of the neighbor of the elevator house, because you had told me that the house across the street, there was a dentist lived there, and he had committed suicide, and because something terrible happened. Oh, that's right. You said he collected teeth. Well, it was a little bit more than that, and he wasn't a dentist, and we did not find that information in local papers. We had to go to St. Louis to get that information. And so we got it from St. Louis, and that was a rough one. That was kind of dark.
Yeah, and the only reason I mentioned this property is what we're talking about. It's a few doors down on the same side of the street. It's like 3 doors down. We were told when I was a teenager living there that a dentist lived there, and he killed himself, and then his son killed himself, and they could see their ghosts in the tower. And so we would walk by this and look in that upper tower. And one time I think we saw something, but I don't know if it was a living person or a dead person in that tower.
Right.
And then, and then we were told a story about why that happened. And so it was a very negative thing. And so I thought, well, that negativity from that place being a few doors down from the house where I lived, that, might kind of be feeding off of each other. And then when I was down there recently, I went down the block to go to a very famous haunted place that is open to the public, and they do haunted tours, and that's owned by a company now that just does that. That's it. And so that is only like 3 blocks away. And then Drury College is right across the street. It's very haunted, has a long history of being haunted. So there's a lot there. And the strange thing is that when I lived there, and then also later, every time I've gone to visit, as soon as I hit that street, I get hit by a wall of this dark, heavy energy. And other people have said the same thing, that it's like walking into soup, this dark energy. So maybe, maybe there's a portal or something, but yeah, there's definitely something going on there. I'll tell you what, we're up on a break. So let's take a short break, and then we'll come back and we'll delve into more about what is in the book, and a few hints about how to do research and how to get that information. So we'll be back right after this. And we're back with the next news. I'm your host, Margie K, and my guest tonight is my partner in crime, Violet Wisdom. And we just released a book, and it is called How to Research a Haunted House. So if you are a paranormal investigator, or you're a homeowner living in a haunted house, or a renter, you might want to check this out. It is available at Amazon right now, and we would appreciate it if you do get the book to leave a review for us on Amazon. We would appreciate it. Took some time to write it. I don't even remember now how long it took us. Do you, Violet?
I think it's been about a year.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. My projects usually take about a year to do. So, yeah. So let's get into a little bit about what you find, what's in the book. How can it help people do some research?
So, first of all, just a few things to know: that what you think you know about your house isn't necessarily factual. And it's not that anyone, told you something incorrect. It's just that the way documents are filed or kept, you can have wrong dates. Half the time, if you go to your county tax and you see what year it shows your house was built, half the time that's incorrect. It might only be incorrect by a few years, but it might be incorrect by 50. Or there could have been a house there before. There's so much unknown that until you start digging into these resources, you just have no idea what might be going on and who may have been there, or again, how long your house may have been there, or there could have been a house there before your house.
Right. Yeah. And, one of the things that you discovered, we were having trouble with the address. And then, of course, you, with your knowledge of history, you found out that addresses change. And in this case, that happened.
Right. I've had that happen several times in my research. The house number can change. The street names change all the time. So I think one of the main roads close to our office has changed names 4 times, and that we know of in history. Mm-hmm. So that happens quite often. And then also when you're using maps, whether you're using a plat map or I go over Sanborn maps, any kind of historical map, it's not always clear where north is. And if you don't make sure you're looking at north, you could be researching the wrong house. So these are the kind of
that's a good
trades you learn after years of wasting about a week on the wrong house.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine.
Like, this is not why. Oh.
Yeah. So some of the tricks of the trade, so to speak.
Right.
So I'm just going to look at the table of contents here. I'm just going to go over a few things so people know what to expect. So first, Violet's section is first, and she talks about tools and references, finding previous owners and residents, historic maps. Some of this stuff I didn't know. Researching residents, a lot I didn't know. Finding stories and photos, finding clues from the past, finding clues in treasures, which is something that you're doing right now, finding on your property, and a step-by-step research project, which of course is about the house in question. And then in my section under hauntings, I talk about the haunted elevator house, how to know if your house is haunted, who is doing the haunting, what to do if there are ghosts in your house, when to call in the pros, when to leave your house. And then, of course, we have an extensive glossary of terms and resources as well. Yeah. So this should be really all a person would need if they're going to research a property and then also discover things about the haunting. And try to figure out who's doing it and why. In my section, that's where my expertise comes in. So I think, we've looked and we haven't found anything like it. So there isn't anything like it out there. I know.
And there's enough that if you want to, you say you have an hour a week and you just want to get some general information, you want to try take some advice from Margie's section and try this, try that. It'll keep you busy. But if you really want to go down the rabbit hole and get deep, all of the information is there for you to be able to do that.
Let's delve into a couple of areas where people might find information. For instance, a census.
Yes.
Of course, the census is done, and it's about who is living in the property, not who owns the property. Correct?
Correct. It's only about who is actually living in the property. I've got other references for you to find out, who owned it. That's a deed. That's who legally owns it. But as you know, anyone can rent a property, and it doesn't matter if you're renting or owning. You're going to end up on a census. I'm trying to have to put my glasses on here for a second.
So what can people find out from a census?
So a couple things I'll point out about a census. And this is kind of hard for me to see, but on this census, if you look all the way to the side, you'll see the street name, and you're going to see the street name on any census so that you know you're at your house. And next to it, in these first section of 3 boxes, should be a street house number, like the actual house number for the address. Oftentimes there isn't. So I've got how to get around that. But depending on the census, there's a census every 10 years, and they're all different. They're all getting different information. The main reason for the federal government to get this is to know how to allocate funds. But you'll have their surname, and they're only going to list one surname per household. And then everyone who lives there, they like to start with the head of the home, and I don't know if they still refer to it that way because censuses don't come out for 70 years. So right now we're all excited to be reading the 1950 census, but they typically had the head of the household as the husband, and then they would list the wife and then the children. And here you can see they have whether they're male or female, their race, their age at the time of the census. That's huge because that's a cross-reference point. As you go deeper into learning more about these people, you need to have a general idea of when they're born. So we can do some simple math. This is a 1910 census. Here I see someone who's 10 years old. They were obviously born in 1900 or 1899 or 1901. So do a plus or minus 1 on both sides because you don't know what month they were born in. Or what month that this necessarily was taken. Census taking can take a while. You're going to sometimes get where they were born, where their parents were born, whether they speak English, whether they can read and write. Real often you'll find out what they do for a living. That's fun for me. I love to know what they do for a living, and that can explain a lot about what you're experiencing if you're having paranormal activity. And I can't get over here. All of the censuses have different questions. There's one post the Civil War that asks if you were a revolutionary soldier, revolutionary sergeant, if you were on the Union soldier or if you were with the Confederacy, and that's just a part you mark on there. There's another one during, I believe, World War II. During the Depression, that'll ask if you were employed in the last 6 months. They're trying to gauge who was working and who wasn't. One of them, I think in the 40s, it has a section to mark if you owned a radio. So,
wow.
They all have different fun bits of information, but they're a great starting point for you to cross-reference because say you get into Family Search or you get into Ancestry and you took that information from the census because now you want to dig deeper. There are a lot of people named John Smith, right? So let's say the person who lived in your house in 1910 was John Smith. You need to go back to that census and see, do the kids' names match up? Do their ages match up? Are we talking about the same John Smith? Because sometimes you're not. So that's a place to start.
Now, I'm a genealogist for our family, and I've used Ancestry for quite some time. What types of things can people find on Ancestry, and is it a good resource?
It's a really good resource. Family Search is also a good resource. It's free. Ancestry does cost. It has a monthly fee, but Ancestry, I feel like, is maybe, I haven't used Family Search in a while. I'm just really familiar with Ancestry because it's what I've always used. But they're both good, really good sources. Ancestry, one of my favorite things about it is just the family trees that already exist. So somebody's already done all that research, and you can't just look at a family tree and assume it's all correct. If you want to know it's correct, do some of your own research to look at each section and say, okay, let me make sure that that's correct, because real often they're just clicking somebody else's work to adding it to their tree, and it's not necessarily right. But the family trees are great help. Sometimes they'll show up in newspaper articles. Real often you'll need a newspaper.com account, but sometimes you can get that free through a library. So there's a lot of ways to get free access to some of this information. I have that all listed in the book. The school yearbooks are really fun, because then you can actually find a picture and see what they looked like. Not a lot of photo opportunities outside of a yearbook, and then family members posting pictures, their own military records, Social Security death index. Oh my gosh, it just goes on and on. Will and probate information. Since the censuses are on Ancestry. So there's a lot. If you want to, they have different tiers of membership. If you want to pay more, you can access more.
Yeah. I've done a lot of research on there. And one trick that I did when I was researching the Ginger Rogers house, we purchased her home where she was born in several years ago, and we had it open as a museum. And then just as an aside bonus, it was haunted. And so I wanted to do some research on that. And so I set up a separate account on Ancestry within my account as a new tree, starting with Ginger Rogers. Virginia Catherine McMath was her legal name. And all of a sudden, here are these little hints for her family. So I was able to go back to England and Wales, multiple generations back, getting her family history. And she's still haunting the house now. But there was one other thing I wanted to mention. Happened a few years ago. I was doing an investigation, and the homeowners had a half brick home where the bottom half is brick and the upper half was wood.
Okay.
Pretty typical of 60s, 70s type of construction. And they were hearing this scraping sound constantly. And they said, it sounds like it's coming from outside the window on the bricks. And they put up cameras. They couldn't see anything. There were no animals doing anything. My first thinking was raccoons, and, there just wasn't anything there. So I did some research. They knew who the previous owner was. So I did some research, and I got into Ancestry.com, and I found out that person was a Mason. There was someone who lived there like 70 years ago, and he was listed as a Mason on the census. So I thought that was pretty cool. He was doing tuck pointing.
He was doing his own tuck pointing.
Yeah. It's just crazy. Crazy.
But that's what I mean. It can make a lot of sense. And then, that's, speaking of just the architectural materials of the property, that's another thing that's covered, because there's clues in the architecture. There's the house that it's definitively a Greek revival. It said it was built in 1840. It's definitely was built in 1840 or 1854. It's perfect as a Greek revival. You go inside and, yep, okay, that's right. The materials are right. The symmetry of the windows, the door, the porch, everything. Yep. And then you go down in the basement. Why do we see concrete block? I'm pretty sure they weren't making concrete block in the 1850s, because they weren't. They were making that more like in the 1920s. Mm-hmm. The house was moved, and it was in a different location. It was moved, and when it was moved, this new foundation was created with concrete block. But when you think about that, when you see two materials coming together that just don't make sense, you see, the corner of a door frame, and it's just off a little. That's telling you architecturally something happened. So the next question is why? Who lived here? What was changed? Was there an addition? Was there a door? Mm-hmm. Was there a door here even before? So many clues in places you wouldn't even think to look.
And that brings up the question: if somebody is haunting a house and it is moved, will they still be haunting it?
Or will they be back in the place where the house originally was?
Yeah. And then where the new house is being built and people want to know why it's haunted because it's a brand new house. Right. I get that question all the time. Why is my house haunted? It's brand new. We had it built. We just moved in. And I always say it's from something that happened before. But also people die in newer houses.
Oh, of course.
Somebody could have died 5 years ago and then you bought the house 4 years ago and there you go.
Yeah. And we do have a section on graves, because you think of graves, you picture, this big, well-kept cemetery, and there were family graves. There were, I've got the stats. I don't remember them. I've got the stats in there, but how many people died along the trails and they were buried where they died. So could there be a house there now? Absolutely, there could.
Yeah, my brother lives in a haunted house here in Independence, and one of the things I found in doing research is there was a graveyard right next door to his house at one time. And that explains why they have ghosts just going through. It's just like a highway for ghosts going through their house constantly. And yes, there are ghosts in graveyards. They tend to stay with their body sometimes. Most of them don't, but there will be a few in the graveyards. So, what are some of the other tricks? What is like the most surprising thing that you discovered when you were doing research that you might not have been aware of before? I know that's a hard question.
Yeah, it really is, because there's 50 of them. And it's not the first time I've been asked that question. And every time I'm like running all these houses through my head. Yours was actually one of them, just finding the obvious connection between what your family experienced and the history of the house. That was one of them. I'm trying to think of something really specific off the top of my head like that. There was one that there was a tragedy, and we discovered it just in researching newspapers. And then we're able to contact a family member of the same family owned the house for over 100 years. And we were able to contact the family member, and it was confirmed, and with an explanation. So that was a little rough, but I can't. Most of them, somebody thought they had someone really famous connected to their house and found out that never happened. But we'd find something really cool besides that, something else that was really neat. So, yeah.
What do you think would be a starting point for everybody who wanted to find out the history of their home? Where would they go first?
My favorite personal starting point is a city directory. If your town had one, that's my favorite personal starting point, because that's going to list residents. It's just residents, and it's yearly. You
When did
should
they
be,
start those?
it depends on where you live. Gosh, I put it in the book when New York, one of the earliest was in New York, and I hate to say it incorrectly. I think it was in the 1700s that they had a city directory, because
I think so.
You didn't have to have a phone to have we had them before phones. They evolved into the modern day phone book, which is now not in exist. I mean, they exist, but nobody gets them. But I start with the city directories. It could be called the city index, because that's just basic. And you get your neighbor's info, and you want to keep your neighbor's info, because when you're searching in the census, that's that cross-referencing for when there's an address missing. So that I start collecting data with that. It's a good thing to talk to neighbors. It's a good thing if you can talk to family members. Understand that you may be getting a version of a story that's not exactly always what happened. And again, we're not doing anything wrong. That's just what they know. The legends and lores, as you always say, they start somewhere. So it's still a good clue. It's like using Wikipedia to do research is a great place to start. And from there you go and, check your own resources. You dig into to better sources that you can verify what you found there. So that's a great place to start, is with family, the local historical society, and go from there. But you'll get clues to start with.
Where do people find a city index?
The library. If they don't have them in the library, sometimes local historical societies will have them. And you never know what person in your town might have them in their basement.
Oh,
I
really?
have friends here that I can't get to the genealogy library to do my research. And so I'm too busy, or it's evening, and I really want to find this one thing. And so I can text a friend who actually has them in his house. So, I'll check it out. I'll send it to you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So,
and that's the other thing. Everyone kind of thinks that all this information is online, and it's not, is it?
It's not. So there are some city directories on Ancestry. So think of the logistics of what's online. What's online either has been digitized and uploaded, and then it has to be searchable and findable, or someone had to type that information into some kind of program. That takes a long time when you're talking about just look at here. We're 200 years old locally. So 200 years of records and journals and diaries and indexes and photographs, like that will be an ongoing long process, an expensive process of digitizing all that information and uploading it. And then there's proprietary issues. So our local paper is not online because our local paper has not released itself to be. You can go look at it on microfilm anytime you want, but it's not online and it's not going to be. So those are some of the reasons why you're not going to get everything online. And again, you can't always trust anything, whether it's online or in person, but it's a great place to start. And you can trust a federal census.
I found several years ago when I was researching my family history, and I knew that we had a relative that was from County Antrim, Ireland. So when we made a trip to the UK, I made the special trip to the historic library. Now, you had to make a reservation in advance. This is if you're going out of country, well, even in country, say, for instance, the Truman Library has a lot of information. You have to make a reservation in advance, and you have to tell them who you are and why you want to be there. So, of course, I did that. And you have to wear gloves when you're going through the paperwork. And I found things there that definitely were not available online. So it's pretty cool. You do have to be willing to make the effort to do this. And of course, not everybody is going to want to do that, but if you're living in the house, you do want to know about your house, and that's probably something that you're going to want to do is in order to figure out, especially if it's haunted, to figure out the reason why. And why that's important is you want to know why that person is attached to the home. Maybe they built the home. Maybe they were the first owner of it, which is something that I find a lot. And they are very attached to the things around them. Older people that have been in a home for a long, long time become very attached to their surroundings, and they don't want to leave. I mean, you see this on TV. They advertise where you can have someone come in and help you, and so you can stay in your home.
I don't want to leave. I don't ever want to leave. Yeah, I want to stay here.
Yeah, I went through that with my grandmother. She didn't want to leave. And so I lived with her for a couple of years so she didn't have to leave her home. And then a couple of days after she passed, she showed up in the kitchen, and my 5-year-old daughter says, "Mom, Grandma's not dead because she's in the kitchen right now." And I turn around and look, and there she is writing a letter like she used to do on the table all the time. She used to write and do the New York Times crossword. That's probably what she was doing. There she was. And so, that is one explanation as to why somebody haunts a place. They're haunting the place. They're not haunting the people generally. But sometimes you run into some wayward spirits who want the people out, and then they start acting up and doing what they can to get you out of their house, which is certainly what happened to me in Springfield. Yeah. But
you have some great tips on that. Like, I didn't know, even just some of the basics of how to identify. I wouldn't have even thought of that and what to do at that point. So, yeah. Yeah.
So, well, that is a show for another time.
Right.
That subject is. Right. But thank you so much for coming on tonight. I know we talk about this every day, but this is a whole different format. And I just wanted to share with people what is actually in the book, and why you're going to find this so unique, because like I said, we researched and there's nothing like this out there. So please go to Amazon, get the book, leave us a review. We'd really appreciate it. And thank you, Violet, for coming on with me, which is something that you don't do normally. You're in the back, you're writing blogs and articles and everything else that you do. So
in my writer's cave, I'm happy in my writer's cave, but here I am.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you. And I'll see you Monday.
Thank you. See you then. Have a great weekend.
All right. You too. Bye-bye. That was Violet Wisdom, and she and I work together almost every day. It's a lot of fun, and she's very knowledgeable, and wow, I think you're going to love the book. I really do. Thanks for joining me this evening, and we'll see you here again next week.